In this episode, I pull on a handle, I make my own throttle, go flying with some friends, and collapse my wing.
If you've been watching my videos, in prior episodes, I've explained how much I really love the sport of paramotoring. But there is also a downside to it, and that is that the sport itself is not quite as mature as it should be. There's some mechanical issues still with paramotoring that I think cannot be ironed out a bit more. Now, paragliding, on the other hand, does seem to be a more mature sport. It's been around a lot longer, and the technology that's used is amazing. But you start throwing a motor on your back and things change a bit. Now, one thing I've complained about since day one, the very first time I put a paramotor on my back, is the throttle. I've always thought that the throttle was an afterthought and ergonomically very, well, not correct. Recently, I've broken a throttle lever and I had to re-look at how throttles were made. Unfortunately, when I broke it, a buddy of mine was coming over and I needed to fix it real quick so I could go ahead and fly, so I tried super glue. For a plastic part, it held for maybe 15 minutes and then it broke again. I was running out of time, so I tried to use carbon fiber, but I didn't have time for it to set, so I took a torch to it. A torch to a plastic piece. It didn't work out and, well, you can kind of see the result. So I had to make my own. But while I was going through the process of trying to make my own, I wanted to make sure that I was ergonomically correct. In other words, I didn't just want to throw together something. I wanted to throw together something that, well, was going to work ergonomically for me, not like a brake lever. Because if you look at these things, it's basically like a brake lever. It does the exact same thing. It moves a cable approximately 1 inch to 2 inches. So if you wanted to buy a brake handle that did the same thing, it would cost you about $10 online. But if you try to buy a throttle that's basically a brake handle for a paramotor, well, they start at over $150. This is one of the signs of the sport being immature. The pricing isn't quite there yet because the market's not quite there yet. And basically, they haven't made the throttle so it's ergonomically correct. Before I explain going into making my own throttle, let me show you what I mean about ergonomics.
Let's start by looking at the ergonomics of a motorcycle.
The primary function of our right arm, right hand, is going to be to control the motorcycle, and that's done through steering. And this is done through a gross motor function. I pull at or below 6 to 10 miles an hour, and I push at or above 6 to 10 miles an hour, depending on if I want to go right or left, and that has to do with steering and counter steering and the circumference of the wheel. I'm not going to get into counter steering and why I push at higher speeds than I pull. That's a totally different topic, but the purpose of this is to explain that our primary function is a gross motor function. To turn the motorcycle, to control the motorcycle, control the balance, I'm doing it with my arm. My secondary function on this hand or this arm is going to be control the speed, and that's done through both the throttle as well as the brake. It's a finer dexterity, and I'm actually using my wrist and my hand, two totally different functions to control two totally different things. The wrist to increase or decrease the throttle, that does not deter or take away from my ability to push or pull with my arm. Additionally, I use my fingers or phalanges to control the brake, and that also does not affect my ability to control my wrist or to be able to control the motorcycle, that first and primary action. It's important that secondary actions don't affect my primary action, and in this case, they don't.
I also have tertiary actions as well, and tertiary functions are done with even finer dexterity using the thumb to turn on and off the motorcycle or to use the horn. Which, of course, those tertiaries do not affect the secondaries, nor do they affect the primary function of what I do with this arm.
If we look at the brakes on a paragliding wing, you'll see that we use gross motor function, or the entire arm, in order to pull down the wing. And so we can use the throttle on our finer dexterity movements in our hand, but the problem is our fingers are being used in order to hang on to the handle. The handle is a bit different than it is like a handlebar for a motorcycle or a bicycle, because it's not stable. We can't rest against it in order to grab a brake handle or a throttle handle. We actually have to separate our fingers, and so you'll see people separate their fingers to where there's 2 in the brake and then 2 on the throttle, or sometimes the middle, and then they're using 1 if they're using a trigger throttle or something like that. But ergonomically, the best way to handle this is the thumb. If the fingers are being used in order to pull the handle, what's left is the thumb. The thumb is free and free movement in order to control the throttle. And so what I tried to do was create a throttle just using the thumb. The problem is that my buddy was going to show up in an hour, and I had very little time in order to make it.
Well, I ended up going to Walmart to try to find a brake handle to fix the throttle, or to make my own. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to find one, but I did find from the Home Depot a universal throttle control that I don't know if it's going to work. I don't know if I'll be able to fly tonight, but you can see that the cable it comes with is actually a rod. It's a stiff cable. It's not a flexible cable, so I don't know if I'll be able to use this. We'll see. This is the throttle mechanism. It actually sticks, and it's made to set at a certain location, so you just set it and it sticks there. So I don't know. I'm going to take this apart, see what happens. Well, hopefully we can fly today. I don't know. It's going to be sketchy. I've got a little less than an hour to make my own throttle. I also bought, let me see if I can grab it here. I also bought a wooden dowel, and I'm thinking that this wooden dowel is the right size for my palm to be able to do the throttle somehow like this. We'll see. Anyway, to work I go, see if I can't make my own throttle in an hour. It just so happens that this the Vitarazi cable actually fits perfectly into the throttle holder for the lawnmower. Let me get that other piece here. Right here. So it actually fits in right here. Right there. It actually fits right into there. And so I actually think I can use this throttle cable, which will be perfect rather than having to adjust it. What I did do, though, is I had to drill a hole right in here and then burn a channel for the cable to come out of. I also got rid of a piece that was, you can see this throttle has this hook on it, and that hook was a series of notches here so you could set the throttle at any place. I got rid of that, and the reason I had to is because I wanted the throttle to free flow. So if we look at this, putting it all together here, basically, it's hard to do in film at the same time. Basically, the throttle will go in right like that, and then I should be able to pull and push the throttle. Once it's together, it'll stay there freely, right? And gosh, I'm hoping this works. If it does, then I just got to figure out how to mount it up on my hand. So, running out of time. Got to go. Okay, so I have the throttle from the lawnmower plugged in, and the throttle actually is working okay here. Sorry, it's hard to film this with two hands and show this. I've now cut a dowel about the right size and drilled a hole through it the size of the hole in this The idea is to just take a bolt, put it through there, and then I should have a working throttle. Something like this, and I should be able to just control the throttle with my thumb here. Sorry about the camera. Yep. And use the kill switch. I'm going to try to mount the kill switch. I'm not sure where I'm going to mount that yet, but I need to figure that out. At any rate, I've got about 10 minutes. Hopefully I'll get it done. Well, here it is. It's ugly. It doesn't look like much, nothing to be proud of, but I did make it in an hour, and it looks like I can fly because I got it done. Basically, I just took a wooden dowel, a bolt, a universal throttle controller for a lawnmower, and some parts from the old Viterazzi throttle, zip ties, and a rubber band. And I should be able to fly now. Basically, the rubber band holds tension back, so the throttle actually comes back. But even if the rubber band broke, I could still use it manually. The kill switch is up here by my thumb. I can still get to that. I can hold the entire mechanism and still hold the brake at the same time while being able to control the throttle with my thumb. So I'm not using any dexterity in my fingers. I'm using all of that to hold the brake and just use the thumb for the throttle. It has potential here. We'll see. I'm going to leave this bolt and I'm not going to cut it out because I'm using it to hold the strap. Well, let's go flying and see what happens.
On the first launch with the new throttle, well, it was a series of catastrophes, one after the other. The first thing here, the lines get tangled in the GoPro on top of my helmet. I had enough headwind to keep that wing up, but the wing doesn't stay up very well because the lines are now caught in my throttle. I look over and I see the left tip collapse here in just a second right there. I keep it going, I keep that wing overhead, I get the lines untangled, and I finally get up off the ground. But the reason that the left was collapsing there had nothing to do with the throttle. It actually had to do with a secondary problem that I learned in just a few minutes. Now, as I was gaining altitude, I noticed that the wing was veering to one side, but I was hyper-focused on the throttle. And of course, the socks and Morty socks are looking great. But I knew something wasn't quite right, so I looked right and left, and sure enough, on the left side, I have a riser twist. Not a big emergency, but something I didn't want to deal with because I'm already hyper-focused on the throttle already. So I decided to turn around, set it down, and fix that issue and take off once again. Meanwhile, my buddy who I was flying with had an engine out, and he had to land in some field, and I didn't know this. He didn't know I had turned back around because of a riser twist. Neither one of us knew where the other was. We finally found each other in the air again, and I then got to put the throttle through its first test. Just prior to taking off, I had swapped out the rubber band to a thicker one because I thought I needed more tension on the throttle lever. But this added extra strain to my thumb, and my thumb quickly got tired. So I decided to swap out that rubber band to the original one and try it the very next day. And so the very next day, after donning the chicken and waffles socks, I was flying with a few friends trying out the 1 hour throttle version 2.0. I was surprisingly amazed. The throttle I had made in an hour was better than the one that I had originally started with, especially down low where I had finite control over the throttle and the speed at which I was going. It was much easier to do foot dragging, and it was much easier to relax and hold on to the brake, not having to worry about the dexterity of the fingers. But all was not perfect. Because I had just thrown it together, it was very bulky, and when I needed to adjust the trim lines, well, I found it a bit of an issue. Secondarily, because I was so hyper-concentrating on the throttle and the performance while I was doing wingovers, I actually took a collapse because I didn't hold brake or pressure on the trailing edge. As soon as that left side collapsed, I felt it and I watched it reinflate in only a few seconds. And this is a huge testament to how safe this sport really is, thanks to modern wings. Once sunset hit, I was actually saddened that we'd have to end the flight, because I was really enjoying my thumb throttle. Now, there was a few design flaws. It needs to be a pull instead of a push on the thumb, and of course it's too bulky, and well, I could list a myriad of things that I would change on it. But for 1 hour's worth of work, I was pretty happy with it.
In retrospect, I think my 1 hour throttle build was actually a success. It worked, it got me to fly, and I learned a lot about the ergonomics of the throttle while I was in the air. Now, the throttle is just one of many things that I think can be improved on the paramotor. But I do see some companies making leaps and bounds. For instance, Scout and Nirvana, I think, are two paramotor companies that have started doing some engineering and started making some headway in the ergonomics of the paramotor itself. Now, just for transparency, I don't fly a Scout or a Nirvana. Let me explain to you why. Hey, can I buy a new What if I...
No.
And so now you know why I don't fly one of those. But maybe one of these days. In the meantime, Chris over at Sky Sports USA sent me a new handle so I can repair my old throttle. And so I'll be putting that together and using that until I make my second version. Somehow I got to figure out how to get a new paramotor. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. I really appreciate it. If you haven't already, please subscribe. And if you liked it, click that like button. If you haven't gone back through to watch prior episodes and you don't quite understand the sock joke, you might want to look at the last episode, episode 10, which I go more into the whole socks thing. And there's other episodes in the future, so I hope to see you again on another video. Yeah, it's recording. Okay. All right, episode 11, take 1. All right, I'll start from the beginning. Take 4. Too nervous. Take 7. Blah. 8, but 8 secondary. Shoot. Take 10. Take 10. So you might want to. And then we're going to. Okay, so. I don't even want to go into that. Okay, so 15. Or, okay, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so I'll cut in a new thing, right? Okay. What else? One more time. 19. Okay. 18, I don't know, 19, 20. And then how do I wrap it up? What do I say? How about that? Good enough. Okay.